Color fade and clear coat peel are very common on Brembo calipers, so I'm going to show you how I made my Brembo calipers go from this to this. So let's take a deep dive into refinishing and rebuilding these Brembo brake calipers. First, I want to start off with kind of a short version of what we're going to do here, just a real quick version if you don't need all the details. So step one, of course, remove your old brake calipers. Then we're going to drain out all the old brake fluid. And we want to remove our hardware, so that removes the pins and the clips and the old brake pads. And if they do need to be repainted, a lot of this process is sanding and cleaning. You want to degrease the calipers. You'll want to sand off all the old clear coat and clean it up really well, get it ready and prepped for paint. We're going to use some compressed air to help remove the pistons from the calipers. Once we pull out all the pistons, we got 4 in the front calipers, 2 in the rear. Then we can remove these dust shield boots. And then within each piston housing, that's where our seals are. So we're going to change the seals out as well. And here you can see the seals and dust boots from one front brake caliper that were removed. I also end up replacing these shims that are inside. Not everyone probably does this, but I did find a place to get new shims for the inside of the calipers. Lots of cleaning on this job. Of course, we got to clean everything up, get our pistons all cleaned up, ready to go. And then we install our new seals and our new dust boots as well. Once the seals are installed, you put the pistons back in place and get that dust boot in place as well. After that, I give it one final cleaning, making sure everything was kind of roughed up, getting it ready for paint. Tape off or cover everything that you don't want to be painted, and then you can paint them yourself or bring them to a professional for painting. Well, now that you've seen the quick version of how to do that, honestly, go ahead and try it if you want to. If you're doing this yourself, I recommend you just kind of watch that first part. Go ahead and try this yourself. And then if you need more details about things, you can come back and watch the rest of this video later. Of course, that doesn't always help me in the YouTube algorithm. You know, I want people to watch it longer. So those of you that are just sticking around because you like watching me do this, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Now, before I go through the tools and parts that you might need for this job, let me just say that this process can take a very long time. I've been filming this video for months, honestly, partially because I didn't need these right away, partially because this is just a project, honestly, that you should kind of have a lot of time for, in my opinion, depending on how picky you really are when it comes to actually getting your calipers really cleaned off and getting everything ready. You could definitely do this a bit quicker if you wanted to, but this might be the best as like a side winter project or something, especially if you don't drive your EVO in the winter. That said, do whatever you want. Just know that it could take quite a long time to do this yourself, and there's certainly a reason why people just send these off to shops to get them rebuilt and powder coated, because sometimes you can just pay people, to do that job, and you don't have to do it yourself. So I do have a tool list on the screen. These are things that I ended up using. Yours might be different depending on what you do. And the parts list could certainly be different depending on what you do as well. But the main things I would recommend doing while you're ripping these apart either way is doing the seal kits. I do have the OEM. I bought the OEM Brembo caliper seal kit for the rear because it's actually not that expensive. But the OEM Brembo caliper kit for the fronts is like ridiculously expensive. So I got the Eurodisc one, or however you say that name, part number on the screen. So that's the one I got. So for the fronts, I wouldn't necessarily go with OEM unless you really want to spend the money. But for the rear, the OEM seal kit didn't seem to be too bad. The guide plates that I mentioned a little bit were really hard to find. I don't think people actually usually swap them out. You probably don't need to, honestly, but I found them on eBay. The brand name was Big Red. Big has 2 G's in it. So if you want to make these really nice looking and change those steel shims, you can do that as well. Speaking of making them look really nice, their Boosted Fabrications makes these caliper crossover brake lines. So if you don't want yours painted, if yours just have issues, or you bought a set of Brembos that just don't happen to have those crossover lines, you can buy those from Boosted Fabrications. I have the OEM brake caliper bleeder part number up on the screen as well. For simplicity purposes, you can definitely buy ones that aren't OEM when it comes to bleeders, because the OEM ones are actually pretty expensive, but OEM part number up there on the screen. And then the hardware kit, the pins and clips. Again, I probably wouldn't necessarily go OEM on this because it's pretty expensive. You can buy an actual hardware kit and then at more of a reasonable price when you do this. All right, let's jump into more of the details. So what I did is, of course, I removed the banjo bolt that holds the brake line to your brake calipers. I removed that and then set these in a pan and let them drain for a while. It will take a bit. You could remove the bleeder screws as well. Of course, those are the main points where, fluid goes in or can come out of your brake calipers. But then I recommend keeping those banjo bolts, those bleeder screws. When you're sanding and doing all this stuff, try to have that stuff closed off. You don't really want dirt and debris getting inside necessarily the calipers themselves. There's a reason that I'm going to do this in the order that I am. And one of those reasons is that I don't want this open and exposed area that's a little bit harder, obviously, to clean, getting a lot of dirt and debris in it from when I'm sanding the stuff down. So that's why we're going to sand stuff down before we actually kind of do the rebuilds. And showing here just disassembling the caliper themselves. Again, you might have to remove those guide pins. That's why you need a punch to remove those guide pins, removing the clip, and then you should be able to pull your brake pads out. No real tricks here other than some of the guide pins can be kind of stuck or sticky if they just have been sitting for a while. Sometimes you can sand them down a bit as needed to pull them out a bit easier. And usually you can reuse those too. You don't really need to put new ones in, but if you just want to look really nice, you can buy new stuff again, or you can reuse your old stuff. Next, I would kind of inspect the dust boot seals and everything and take a nice look inside your calipers, see how everything looks. You can see the piston, is the innermost part, and then we got our dust boot seals outside of the piston. This caliper itself didn't really look too bad. But this other caliper, for some reason, I don't know what they were doing. It looks like someone smeared on a whole bunch of stuff that kind of was like sticky in there. So either way, if you're changing the seals, you should be changing the dust boots as well. Now, sanding and doing all this prep, this paint prep, this is most of the work. This is like 100%, not 100%, but this is a lot of the work. As you can see, clear coat fading off here. Where there's big chunks of clear coat, I obviously want to get all that off kind of all the way. Where there's going to be a harsh line, if you can kind of feel it, transition with your fingernail, then you kind of know it's going to show up in the paint. So we're going to have to get most all that clear coat off either way, just to make sure this new paint is going to stick pretty well. I have different sandpaper, finer grit, coarser grit you can start with. I'm not going to give you specifics exactly what to use. I think the 80 grit was almost a bit too coarse, but you can use whatever grit you want as long as it's not leaving too harsh of scratches in it. If it is, then of course you can go down to a finer grit. I also utilize the screwdrivers a lot, pry bar screwdriver kind of things, just to scrape a lot of the crap out. Obviously, I sprayed them down and degreased them, but that doesn't really get everything out. I honestly did not film probably 3/4 of my work on prepping these because it took a long time. Of course, doing this for one caliper, then had to do it for the other 3. But I really spent a lot of time scraping out and getting them really clean. I was probably spent way too much time on this, more than I needed to, but that's just kind of the person that I am. Sometimes it feels therapeutic, honestly. If you just want to sit out in the garage, spend some time cleaning up a part, it can be a not a bad thing to do when you got the spare time. But again, that's why I mentioned potentially plan on this taking a long time for you to actually do this project. So again, utilizing a smaller screwdriver here just to kind of help scrape off a lot of that thicker clear coat that was on these calipers, scraping that all off, getting everywhere, getting in from almost every angle is honestly pretty tricky and what's hard to do with this as well. Again, just a note, have your bleeders in, still screwed in, have, that other banjo bolt where the brake line connects, have that screwed in as well. Again, just try to minimize openings to where the brake fluid normally is, because you just don't really want to get that extra dirty inside there, or any dirt inside there, if you can avoid it. Now, these shims that I discussed a little bit as well that are in here, these can be a real pain to get out, especially depending how long your calipers might have been sitting. So again, if you don't think, if they don't look really worn down and you don't want to deal with it, just leave them in. You don't necessarily need to swap them out. From what I gather, I don't think everyone does. Again, it was really hard to find a kit for those. But I just pointed out where those are, and I used some PB Blaster. I sprayed them. I let them sit for a while. They are tricky for sure to get out because of that torque style head. I think the new ones actually were not the torque style, so be careful with potentially making sure what style bolt they are. It could definitely be different than what mine was. But then I had to utilize a smaller 1/4 inch ratchet to try to get in there and break them free. Most of them went pretty well. One of them kind of started stripping out. It's a tight squeeze to get in there. So again, take your time. Make sure you don't end up stripping the head of the bolt or something, because then you're just going to make a lot more work for yourself. Although if it's stripped tight, I think you can just leave it in there. If it's, as long as nothing's too damaged on that specific piece. Once I did have them out, though, I will say it was nice that I was able to then kind of clean up everything a little bit more around that area as well. It's easier to get in there, scrape things out, and get it nice and cleaned up. So what we have here is just a general Milwaukee air pump. It had a fitting on it that actually worked well for me to just kind of put a bit of air into the caliper to kind of help push out the pistons. But my main idea for pushing out these pistons was just to shoot some compressed air in there, and then have like a wood block or something to kind of course, keep them from pushing out too far. The issue you're going to run into here is that usually one piston is going to pop out, the other one's not, something like that. Be smart if you're doing this exact thing, of course, because what's going to happen is that piston could literally just kind of shoot right out. So you could pinch your finger, do something like that if you shoot enough compressed air in there, and then your piston just kind of shoots out. You don't want your hand in the way. The idea here, what they tell you to do, honestly, in the owner's manual, is to tell you to kind of keep shimming this and basically making it smaller every time as you go, so they kind of press out equally. And I get the general idea behind it. That's why initially I just wanted to make sure they would all push out a little bit. But of course, as you can see here, the first try, it just pushed out the one piston, and it wouldn't even budge on pushing out the second one. So when that happens, you just end up pushing that one back in and trying again. And my general goal for this, honestly, was just to try to make sure they're all kind of loose in there and that they all recently kind of pushed out. So there was a lot of trial and error for me doing this. I ended up making some of my own custom wood blocks that would kind of act as shims. I don't think you necessarily need this. I probably spent way too much time trying to get these to actually push out like all the way. I have seen videos from other YouTubers where they literally just like put a vice grip on these and just try to rip them out. I wouldn't recommend doing that specifically, because you don't really want to like maul up or get any marks on the pistons. But if that YouTuber did it and then it worked fine for him, I guess whatever. Maybe it's not as big of a deal as I think. But as you can see, I really ended up just making almost a thicker version than the 2x4 even. And that way, eventually I could end up getting it to press all of them out at least a little bit. And then I tried to work my way down as far as thickness goes and make it thinner. I also utilized a screwdriver at some point and kind of used it again instead of my fingers, because I didn't want to pinch my fingers. So I utilized a screwdriver at some points to try to get pressure on one side of the block or the other, put something in there to space it out where I could then kind of pull it out as well. Again, just really trying to get these all to at least come out somewhat, so then I could kind of grab them and then pull them out really the rest of the way as needed. And honestly, in hindsight, I think I tried too hard really just to try to get them all out at once. Really, once you kind of get those dust boot seals around the edges kind of pried down, that's what can help a lot to get these out. They just kind of create this suction where they kind of hold this piston in place. So eventually I got to the point on these where I'm like, well, this piston is pretty much all the way out. So I went ahead and pulled that one out and then started working on getting out the other three. Again, I utilized a screwdriver. There is a lip on the piston where you can kind of get on there with a screwdriver and try to pry them out. But again, it doesn't come out super easy. And what I did realize, though, is I kind of really wanted to pry down that seal that is around it. And again, just try to eliminate the suction of that seal. Also noting there's different piston sizes in these front calipers. They have a larger and a smaller piston. I did seem to learn through doing this that the smaller piston, I think, is the same from the rear calipers as it is in the front. So I think those are pretty much interchangeable. But here you can see where I kind of just rolled back that dust boot seal and then pulled it up. That's kind of what I would definitely recommend trying to do. Just roll that back and then pull it up and out. Take a look at your pistons and inspect them as well once you get them all out. They shouldn't have any big deep scars on them, deep scratches. One of mine, I'll show you a little later in the video, definitely was a little bit messed up, but everything's been fine. I've been running these brake calipers on the Red EVO for a couple months now and everything seems fine, but you can check that out for yourself later. So there we go. Finally got one fully disassembled. You can see all the pistons I took out. You can see how I ended up ripping and cutting some of those seals to just kind of help get those pistons out compared to the one where we still need to fully disassemble it. So here we go again. This is my second attempt. Of course, this is on the other caliper. This one went a lot faster. I'm speeding these things up, of course, for you to take a look, but just showing you, I just thought it would still be valuable to show you how I did it on this one. This one definitely seemed to go a lot faster for me to get sorted out. And I kind of, again, used that screwdriver in there as a little bit of leverage as needed to try to pry the way I needed. So it would work whatever way I wanted it to try to push out each caliper or each piston, I should say. A simple note, again, you probably want to do a lot of your prep work on your paint prep work before you do this. Although, again, I will say I'm so picky, or was at least a little bit finicky about this, that I ended up doing more paint prep work after I fully, changed out the seals and the dust boots and all that stuff. So you can do it later too. I would just, again, recommend trying not to be scraping big chunks of paint off or anything when your pistons and everything are fully removed. Hard to show the fact again on camera, but like anything else, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And I think it took me probably half the time to do this second caliper than it did to do the first one. Same process on the rear. I'm just going to show it on screen here, a little bit of doing it just so you can see a bit of how I did it. So that might be helpful. But of course, same thing. It should just be a bit easier because there's only one on each side. So it's a little bit more effective when you're utilizing the air to get them out. As always, I'm curious what you did. If you did this yourself, let me know if you just got in there and pried them out yourself with some sort of screwdriver or something else and just pulled on them and got them out. Let me know what you did and what worked for you. So this is one of the pistons in the rear that seemed to have a little bit of like damage to it, if you will. It seemed like it was definitely had some scarring marks on the side. Not really sure what happened there, but that one was a little bit messed up, but for the most part, these were all fine. I did end up using them all over again. You want to clean them up, of course, as well. You're going to spend some time getting out any of the debris, that larger debris that could be in there. Use some brake clean. You can use a razor blade and or a smaller screwdriver just to get all the little kind of pieces off. Clean up a lot of that area where that groove is to get all those little pieces out of there. Now we can move on to removing these seals, these dust boot seals, I guess. And what you can do with that, what worked best for me was just using a smaller screwdriver and getting on the edges and prying a little bit in there and then prying them up. That's really what ended up working the best for me. Can require a little bit of force wherever you can find the best spot to get in there to pry them up. That's what should do the trick to get them up and out of the way. I will say I feel like I've seen photos of some of these after they're rebuilt and I don't feel like they're pushed in as far. I don't think mine actually ended up sitting fully flush either once I put them in. So I'm honestly not 100% sure how far these dust boot parts are supposed to sit, but whatever. Again, I'm willing to learn on that one. So, if you know more than I do or have some advice on that, please let me know. And now inside, when you look inside here, you can see that there is another groove inside this part. And then within that groove is your other seal that we need to fully remove and replace. So that's part of what we're going to replace here is this seal. Another one that's a little bit tricky, but utilizing a small screwdriver, once I was able to kind of get in there and then push it or pull it out of the groove, I should say. Again, be careful not to like mar anything in there. You don't want to leave any deep scratches in there or anything if you can avoid it. But you can see there, I just kind of pulled it. It's a little tough to see, but I pulled it up and got it down. And then you will get your fingers in and grab it once you kind of get out of that groove. Noting again that these are different sizes. There's a smaller one and a larger one. We'll get to that later when we go to put the new ones in as well. But you're just gonna have to remove all those seals. Sometimes they have little hook type tools as well that you can utilize for that. And that's an area too where if you found a tool that worked well, it might be appreciated if you tell us about it in the comments. Now that everything's been removed, here's a shot showing, of course, these old seals and these old dust boots. And you can tell the difference in size here as well, of course, the smaller ones and the larger ones. I'm honestly not sure how tightly these were supposed to really fit on these pistons here, but you could see it was definitely a little bit loose. I'm sure they just kind of get a little worn out over time, which is exactly why we want to change them. And just because I like to compare things, taking a look here at the rear piston, smaller rear piston. There's obviously only one size in the rear caliper, but in the front calipers, the smaller piston seems to be identical to the one for the rear. So just an interesting side note for anyone curious. I believe they could be totally interchangeable. The small piston for the front caliper on the EVO 8 and 9 Brembos should be able to be interchangeable with the rear caliper EVO 8 and 9 pistons. So now we're almost ready to move on to the assembly portion. But I'd say almost ready because you definitely need to do some prep work before you want to put everything back together. Take a look inside the cylinders of the calipers. Make sure everything's cleaned out. You can see this one's still a little bit dirty. We're going to spray some brake clean in there. We're going to make sure we wipe everything out, get everything nice and clean. We don't want any debris in there that could clog things up or get a deep scratch when we reinstall these pistons. And of course, same thing with these pistons and especially those grooves. Make sure you get everything cleaned out. You might have to just lightly scrape things to get them out as well. Now, I mentioned everything you would kind of buy earlier, but of course, just showing what the kits are that I have. Again, the OEM Brembo kits for the rear and the other brand name for the fronts. I also utilize some compressed air to give these their final cleaning. So, of course, once I sprayed them with brake clean, I made sure I got all the other loose debris off of them. Just spraying them with a little bit of air can also help give you that final cleaning to make sure everything's good to go. And of course, you can see I'm working on a fresh, clean surface as well. That's also a good thing to do. So not only the pistons, but obviously the calipers, we were doing a lot, scraping of the paint and doing all that stuff. If there was any little bit of debris from the paint that might have got inside the calipers itself, I'm going to do my best to make sure those come out. So I'm also going to spray or use the compressed air, I should say, to try to make sure I blow everything out as well before we go to put these all back together. So once we have everything as clean as we can, we're going to move on to installing, of course, our new seals. So the good news is with this rear OEM Brembo kit is that it did come with some basically like assembly lube, and there was enough in there for me to utilize to do actually the front and the rear calipers all together with just that. Otherwise, I've read and heard you could simply also use regular brake fluid as just some sort of assembly lubricant, but we're going to want some, of course, lubricant to put these together. And the OEM Brembos also come with a big, huge instruction paper, so if you want to learn more, you can read those instructions that come with as well. And just some final shots here showing how everything is pretty much cleaned up and ready to be assembled with our calipers. So again, here's the assembly lube I mentioned that comes from Brembo. So of course, we're going to open that up. And this is very slippery stuff, which I guess is the point. But have some paper towels ready. You're going to have to wipe off your hands at some point, of course, as well. I probably should have also been wearing gloves. If you want to wear gloves, you could use some other form of glove as well to keep your hands from getting probably so slippery. It is harder to do some of the stuff while filming and stopping the camera and doing all that stuff too without gloves. But you do whatever you're comfortable with here. But what you're going to do, of course, is put some lubricant on the piston itself. And then we're going to put some inside the cylinder of the brake caliper as well. And we're going to do that on both sides of the caliper, of course, right away. And then we're going to grab that inner seal, the seal that goes inside the cylinder here. We're going to put some assembly lubrication on that as well. And of course, you're just going to put it in place and get it so it's all the way in that groove inside the cylinder. Again, unfortunately I did this, filmed this, man, I don't know, 4 months ago. So I don't remember any tips or tricks specifically to getting it in there, but obviously it's looks like it took me a couple attempts, at least this first time, to get it in. But once it's in that groove and it's sitting like it should, sitting flat all the way around, that's of course the end goal. And it does appear there that I just kind of held in one side with some fingers and then pushed it down on the other side. And of course, take a look. It should look like this and be sitting in that groove all the way around without being twisted or anything, of course. And there you can see on the other side that we don't have that seal inserted yet. Repeat the process, certainly going to have to do this a lot, but again, I did film doing a lot of it, so I will show you a lot of it just in case that can be helpful to you. But describing the process, of course, is going to be very similar for everyone. Make sure you put some assembly lube on it and then slide it in place. It looks like I got that second one a little bit quicker on the other side of that caliper. Next, this outer seal and dust boot, if you will, we're going to put some assembly lube on that as well to make sure we can slide it in. These pushed in a little bit harder overall. It's not really sure why that is specifically, but I think the fronts were a little even worse than the rears. But what I did, as you can see here, is I just put the seal part in the groove of our piston first and kind of got this around the outside of the piston. And then I dropped it in kind of as one full complete unit. Again, adding a little bit more lubricant here, just because you can't really use too much other than the fact that if you run out, you want to make sure you have enough, of course, to do the whole job. But line it up, of course, make sure you keep it as straight as possible. Try to push evenly, keep some even pressure on. You can tell I kind of was actually squeezing pretty hard here and it didn't quite go in on the first attempt. And there, once I actually kind of used both hands, you could see I had enough force and pushed it in and got it to slide in place. Give it a little extra push there to get it completely flat. They should be able to push down pretty much all the way flat. And in this case, it does look like that outer dust boot part kind of fell in pretty easily. And again, from my memory, I just don't remember it being the case on the fronts, but we'll get to those in a second. Repeating the process on the other side of the caliper, of course, doing the same thing. Just going to speed this up since it's the same process. But again, I still like to show it to you just in case seeing it from a different angle might give you a little bit better view of what to do if you're doing this yourself. So obviously it's going to take a bit of pressure to a bit of force to push them in. But I think the main thing is kind of just making sure that they're straight and not going in crooked or anything like that. And with enough pressure, they should be sliding in. And kind of once they start sliding in, obviously they pretty much did continue to slide in fairly easily after that. So there we go. Technically, we have rebuilt this one caliper. It just looks pretty ugly yet because it hasn't been repainted and restored. So that was a rear. Now we're going to move on to the front. Again, I'm going to show you this process. It's the same thing. It really is the same thing. So if you don't find this useful, you can certainly skip ahead. But I did want to show installing or rebuilding, of course, a rear and a front. And especially since this kit is a little bit different, note that the seals for the inner seals are kind of inside the dust boot seals. So if you get this kit and you don't think you got everything, make sure you check for a seal inside a seal. Applying more assembly lube again to the inner cylinders of our caliper here, and then also putting some assembly lube onto the new inner seals. And going ahead and sliding those in. Not the best shot. My arm's kind of blocking it a little bit there, but same process. If you did it on the other ones, you should be able to do it on these. Obviously, the way these calipers are designed, it's kind of harder to get a view inside some of these to actually see exactly what's going on. So I apologize for that, but filming it the best I can here, installing these seals. But of course, once all those inner seals are in place, we're going to move on to our pistons. Again, of course, knowing that there are the larger pistons and the smaller pistons, one of them on each side. Again, assembly lube on there, and then just applying these dust boot seals over and putting them, getting them into that lip that they drop into, and then we can insert the piston. You can see it required, again, a little bit of force. They're not just going to slide right in super easy. You're definitely going to have to push them in place, assumedly because of, the new seals. And it's not like they came out the easiest either. So they're going to require a little bit of force to push in place. Another reason to have the assembly lube, of course. So now that we did the smaller piston, I believe, we're going to move on to the larger one. And same process again, just putting that dust boot seal on, making sure everything's cleaned up and lubed up, and then we're going to push that seal in place, or that piston in place as well. And I feel like these are the ones where I definitely played a little bit more, trying to make sure that dust boot seal was flush and flat. But I will say I don't think that's going to happen all the time. I don't think those dust boots are going to sit totally flat, and I believe that's okay. Again, judging by some other pictures I've seen of other people's brake calipers when they rebuild them, I don't think those dust boots technically need to go in all the way. Of course, from what I understand, you just want to make sure that they're going to seal and that they're in so far as of course that they wouldn't just like pop out or anything. Looks like on this one, I just tried a little different way. I put the piston in first before I put the seal around it. But of course, I didn't push it all the way down before I put that dust boot seal in. So of course, more than one way to do it. And here you go. I like this shot because you can see that those dust boot seals are not exactly all the way flush, but they're pretty close. So you can see they're protruding up a little bit. There's a little lip on them, but that's about how they stayed. That's about as far down as they would go. And again, I've been running these brake calipers on my red EVO for months now, and they've been perfectly fine. So, usually the proof is in the pudding. No issues since rebuilding these so far. And of course, that's a good sign. It's also part of the reason I would wait so long to make this particular how-to video. And now more of a time lapse of doing the other front caliper, just doing it, change the view a little bit, got a top down view and just did a time lapse kind of me assembling this. Again, same process, don't have much else to add, but just wanted to document doing it all. So here it is. And now it's probably a good time to say there's more than one way to do this. And of course, this was pretty much my first time actually, fully rebuilding these calipers. So if you have advice, if you found something that worked better to do this, any of the steps, please go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section down below. Help us all out. But there we go. Now you can wash your hands, get all that slippery, slimy stuff off your hands or remove your gloves, and then we can continue to move on in this process. And now that they are technically rebuilt, what we want to do is really do the final stages of our paint prep. And in this case, what I want to do is really kind of block off, of course, any areas that were openings to the caliper, air brake fluid areas at all, of course. So we're putting all our bleeders back in. I have a bolt in place just kind of where the line would connect, the brake line would normally connect. And then I also have other areas that I don't want painted, such as where the mounting surfaces are. So I had some different bolts in place that I just kind of screwed on that I didn't care if they got painted. And it was also, additionally, it's another way to kind of grab onto these or hold them when they're getting painted and stuff like that. So again, more than one way to do it. You could kind of just tape it all off if you wanted to as well. But what I did is kind of just wanted to utilize what I already had as far as bleeders and some of the bolts and hardware I had just to make sure everything that I didn't want painted doesn't get painted. These are really hard to actually, there's so many different lines. There's so many different levels, tight spots to get into. But realistically, obviously for paint to stick, one of the main things is that you kind of can sand it a little bit, that you can get some of the original clear coat off. You got to give it something to stick to. You got to give a place for that primer or paint to stick to. So this wire brush that I bought here, I just kind of went around and tried to make sure I scuffed everything up as good as I could. So hopefully the paint will stick when these get repainted. And as we mentioned, there are certain things we don't want painted, and I personally didn't want the seals to get repainted. I didn't want the pistons to get repainted since, those are brand new seals, dust boot seals that we put in. So I tried some different things with painter's tape here. None of them really worked super well, honestly, but all of it worked good enough, I guess, to get this done right. So this is an area too where honestly, if you have any advice and you've done this before, go ahead, let me know what you think works best to actually kind of tape things off before you go to get them painted. But as you can see, first I tried kind of cutting out these circles to the right size of the seal, and then I set the tape over it. That didn't necessarily work the best, and especially without putting something like inside the brake cylinder itself or the brake piston, because it seems like this tape just was not sticky enough to really want to stick down. I tried the different color painter's tape, which I guess I wouldn't think would make a difference, but I had it here, so I tried the blue and the green painter's tape, and again, nothing really stuck too well to those seals or the pistons. But one trick that did work decently enough was just to take a paper towel or something, a napkin or whatever, to kind of stuff it inside, and that gave me some surface area for that paint to stick to. And really, probably overthinking it here anyway, because no one's going to see this stuff other than like the photos and the videos like I show you now. Once these are on your car, no one's seeing the inside area like this. So it's not really a big deal. I assume if there was some paint on the seals, it wouldn't matter too much, but I'm not too sure. Either way, I just didn't really want the seals themselves to just have some paint on them. So that's why I went through this process as best I could to tape everything off and tape off those seals. I ended up kind of abandoning my cutting out the circle one and just kind of going for straight edges because that was totally fine. Again, if there's some spots that have the older red paint, I don't care as long as kind of that seal didn't get painted. That was kind of my main goal. As always, repeat that process over and over again. Do it for every caliper. And on this larger front caliper, you can see I just used kind of two pieces of tape and kind of just focused on making sure they were just covering the seals, the edge of those seals, and then kind of left it at that. Now, before you paint anything, another reason to actually put the hardware in is because then the threads are, of course, occupied by the bolt, meaning that paint can't really just get in the threads and potentially screw it up or just make it harder to get your bolts in. And that also applies to these little spacers, the shims that are in place. So I kept these other OEM ones that came off of the car, of course. These ones were pretty rusty and kind of crappy, but they'll work perfect for this because they can get painted. I don't care if they get painted. I just want them to block the thread holes so no paint gets in the thread holes. And here's a bit of a final look before these are kind of off, ready to be sent off to be painted. You can see I just taped off the bleeders as well. I had those tightened up. I had everything else taped off that I didn't want painted. I put four of those screws in for those shims, had those in there as well. And that's a final look. Of course, now if you really do need to like scrape a little bit more off, you could potentially do that. If you needed to sand a bit more in certain spots, you could do that. I wish I would have sanded a bit more on one of these larger ones because it was kind of scratched so much that when it came back from the paint, you could kind of see it after it had gotten painted, but that was my fault because I didn't prep it well enough. But if you're hoping I would show you how to paint these, I apologize. You can spray can these or do whatever you would need to. I would, of course, recommend that you do a primer and then do a paint. But I would also just recommend talk to your local body shop or talk to someone and do what I did. I brought them to someone that does paint. If you do all this hard work for them, if you get everything prepped, that's a lot of the work. If they can just kind of spray these when they're spraying something else and you have everything ready, it shouldn't cost you too much to take this to a professional that has a professional spray gun and that can just paint these for you. So that's what I ended up doing in this case. I did not paint these myself. I sent them off to a friend of mine, had him paint him. Shout out Mike. Thanks for painting these for me. So that's what I recommend you do. Find a local body shop if there's one near you. Otherwise, do some practice painting with some other, of course, high temp paint. In this case, you definitely want something that can be high temp since these are, of course, your brake calipers that are going to get hot. And once they came back, disassembling everything, you can see the tape came off a little bit. There's a little bit of overspray on that one, but it wasn't too bad. It actually worked out okay overall. The tape didn't just shoot right off, so that's good. You can obviously still tell the pistons are pretty much paint free here. A little bit of overspray on the seals, but again, no big deal. No one's ever going to know the difference as long as you don't make a video showing everyone exactly what they look like on the inside. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's a long process. There's a reason people just pay a decent amount of money to send these out to get them powder coated or anything like that. All that said, I do want to make sure I say, why also like the areas that I didn't want paint on, especially the mounting surfaces. The reason you really want to make sure that those aren't painted is because I've heard at least that, the paint itself can kind of act as a shim. And eventually that shim wears away because the paint can kind of, it's going to come off eventually on the mounting surfaces. So that's the reason I really wanted to make sure I blocked off those two areas where the calipers bolt up because I didn't want any paint on them where it could, potentially make my brake caliper come loose. And depending on the powder coating shop you have do this, again, depending on how much prep work you did yourself, but I would try to make sure that those areas don't get painted or powder coated, or if they do, make sure you sand off the paint on those areas. And of course, removing those bolts that hold those shims in as well, getting all those out of the way. And that's what it looks like. You can obviously see the areas that didn't get painted where they're going to mount up. So that's good. You may have seen too, I used some larger washers on there to try to cover all the surface area, or at least most of the surface area. Just because if it was just a bolt, you'd have a little bit of the edges, around it of the bolt shape that were painted. Now moving on to these shims again, I think I found these on eBay, the big red. Hopefully, you know, if you didn't do this part, you're pretty much done. If you didn't change yours out at all, they should probably just be good to go. But here are the shims that I bought, their front and a rear kit here. And of course, I believe it would make sense. The rears are a bit smaller. And it does look like the 005 is the rear that we're going to start with. So I just did a test fit, made sure they looked, of course, right, that they looked the same as the other ones. The one thing I did notice, which it's probably assumedly part of the design, the old ones, of course, were completely flat. These new ones are kind of bowed out in the center a bit, and I assume that's how they're supposed to be. Again, just making an assumption, not 100% an expert here, but you can see that they are definitely bowed out a bit. So you're going to want to make sure you have these lined up right, and when you tighten them down, it's going to kind of flatten them out. They had some assembly lube as well, so I put a little bit on the edges and a little bit on the bolt, and then used the assembly lube that they provided. Again, tight fit, but if you remove them, you should be able to get them back in. I think these might have came with a different style head, though, a torque style head or an Allen style head, so be mindful of that as well, of course, when you're reinstalling. I do like the look. It made it look a lot nicer inside to put these brand new shims in there. And there it is, one final shot after everything's tight and in place. Everything's looking pretty good. And because I like to show everything I did and over film everything, we're doing the same thing with the fronts here. Of course, this looks like the 04 kit. So these are, I believe, a little bit larger. So same process here, just putting a little bit of that lubrication on the edges here. So it can kind of slide down. That was my theory anyway. So when you tighten it up, it could just slide down smoothly, but tighten up those shims as well. And now, pretty much almost done. It looks like there's some brake calipers, but there's something obviously missing to make them really stand out. And that something is stickers, man. You got to have stickers. So there are different places you can buy stickers. If you're really interested and want to use the ones I used, you can reach out to me. I have a whole bunch of them, but I'm still waiting to see how they hold up. So I feel like they're not holding up super well right now. I had to order a whole batch of them just from an online place. And mine also don't say Brembo, they just say brakes, because I thought it would be funny to make them just say brakes and make it look like Brembo, but it just says the word brakes because I thought it'd be, you know, interesting to label them as what they are because they're brakes. If you are ordering your own stickers, though, make sure you get the whatever color is offset, right? If you painted yours white, get the red stickers. I painted mine red, so I got the white stickers on my second order because I accidentally ordered red stickers at first. But I think if you're going to go through this much trouble to paint them, stickers are definitely worth it, no matter what. But if you have the hookup, if you know where to get the great stickers, even the OEM ones, leave a comment about that as well. But boom, here we go. These are looking pretty excellent. I'm really happy with how they turned out overall. I'm happy that they worked. They're working great, of course. As I mentioned, they're on the red EVO, working well. So the fruit of my labor certainly paid off, but it was a lot of labor. So that's everything I have for this video. I certainly hope you found it helpful. And if you did find it helpful and if you want to help me out, the best thing you can probably do, of course, is just like and comment and be sure that you're subscribed. But as always, this is Paul from Boosted Films saying thanks so much for watching. I just want to say that domestic violence is never okay. If you or someone you know is experiencing issues with a partner and doesn't feel safe, please visit the website thehotline.org or call 1-800-799-SAFE.